It is a little strange. um, I'm grateful for the few that are in the room, and I'm grateful for you who are probably sitting in your living room or somewhere else and joining us in worship. And thank you, Joseph, for choosing that one particular song to minister to, especially to our brother and sister Walter and Tiffany, and all of us who are hurting with them with that terrible loss that they went through last Sunday. This is the Lord's Day, and it seemed very appropriate that during this period when our shelter-in-place order from our county started on Monday, and then the rest of the whole state joined us later in the week. And there's lots of places around the country that's doing this, and it's almost like like a nationwide stop, and the costs are not easy, but we're going to learn. We're learning, and maybe for some of you, I know that I heard a story this week that this week being at home with your children and trying to just change all your routines is stressful. But this is the Lord's Day, and let's worship. And one of the ways we're going to worship is take a second week on this very important commandment of keep the Sabbath and keep it holy, and come to this command, which literally means Shabbat, Sabbath, literally means to stop. And so it's a kind of part 2 from last week. And I've entitled this message, A Window into Eternity. Because last week, we're really talking about what Jesus did in the past. But this week, we're really going to look at what hope we have for the future. And so, I want to look at that as you look at what is Sabbath. It's a way of reshaping your time and reshaping all of your days, and then the way you rethink rest and work, and then the promised land to come. So let's get into it. Part 1, Sabbath as a window to the promised land. All right. Part 1, Sabbath as a window to the promised land. Part 2, I want to give you another important piece of wisdom of how to go about doing this, and I'm going to call part 2 cycles of life-giving rest. We're going to have to learn. We're not good at this, and even one of the passages I'm going to look at today even tells you that you have to. This is strange. Strive to come into a rest. And so I'm going to give you an important piece of wisdom on this. Cycles of life-giving rest is part 2, and part 3. I want to close by sharing the gospel with a quote from a famous song, "Far as the curse is found," because this is what we're talking about here. Through Jesus, work has become cursed, but as far as the curse is found, Jesus has released us, and we can begin to taste that through Sabbath, okay? Okay. Part 1, Sabbath is a window to the promised land. Let me start with this illustration. You ever been on a plane, and you're going someplace, and you're really looking forward to going there? So, like my wife is from New York, and so every couple of years we get to go and see our family out there. And so as the plane is starting to descend, you could see all the great skyscrapers of the city. Or a few years ago, our family went to Hawaii, and what you get is you get this window, and you're not there yet. You're not there yet, but you can start to see it. So you're in a plane, and you're on a journey, and you can begin to see it, and you can't fully experience what New York or Hawaii is going to be like, but your heart and your life can start to look forward to it and anticipate it, and you're on this journey. And so it's very helpful to have that window, because then that window helps you to see where you're going. And this is I think this thing that I want to talk to you about today is that, it's like, how do you see this? How do you see into this promised land that we're going to? I mean, we call it heaven, but the Bible calls it a promised land. And all of this stuff about Sabbath is, what does it mean to not live enslaved in Egypt? Last week I told you that all of us, if there is no other place to go, and there is no other that there is no other king besides Pharaoh. There will be a Pharaoh in your life, and he will squish you by his thumb. And in many of your cases, your Pharaoh might be you. And so there's, 7 days a week, all the work that you have to do, and all the guilt and anxiety of what you're supposed to do. One of the brothers I was talking to this week, of course through video, he was saying that he was realizing that on a given Sunday, this is supposed to be his Sabbath, but anxiety from the work that he has to do on Monday starts seeping into his mind. And that anxiety, he started realizing is, well, that anxiety is kind of messing up the holiness of this day. It's supposed to be separate, and it's supposed to be a gift. And as I'm doing this, essentially my heart is breaking Sabbath. And so what we're talking about here is you need something in your life. And the Lord graciously put this. So this command is not just to go do this and go do a piece of religion. Really, it's putting a profound practice in your life. And it's the whole day becomes a window into something that you can look forward to. Now, I want to take you to another passage in the Bible. And it takes a little bit of explaining. But I want to take you to this passage and see, are we getting it up here? Hebrews chapter 4. Excellent. So before we look at that, I need to give you a little bit of background so you can explain this. It's a bit of a complex, and quite frankly, it's a kind of a frightening passage. But I want to give you, there's two important pieces of background you have to get to understand what I'm going to take you to here. One is that all of work, when Adam and Eve disobeyed, there were two huge curses that were placed upon us through the sins of disobedience. Eve received the curse of all her relationships. Relationships are cursed. And then the other thing that was cursed, Adam received the curse of his work. It says, this is from Genesis chapter 3. I'll just give you a quick, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and has eaten of the tree, you shall not eat of the tree of life. But instead, cursed is the ground because of you, thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat of the plants. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Now, I want to just stop for a moment here. Work was commanded by God before the fall. So some of you think that heaven will just be this place will be eternal vacation. It will not. I don't think that's true. I think there'll be work, because work was good. But this thing that we all intuitively know is good and really important in life, most of you wake up in the day, and even if you're not going off to work to make money, if you are a stay-at-home mom, you know there's a lot of work to do. If you are a student, you're not making money, but there's work to do. And I talked about last week of a graduate student, a PhD student, and she had to basically take a whole day. She's not making much money because at that stage in her life, she's a PhD student in science, but she had to learn to stop. Now, why? Because work is cursed. And one of the important things is, if all 7 days was done with work, then you would be under that curse every day. And all your life you'd be under curse. And that's the way it is in Egypt, under Pharaoh. You're under the curse of Pharaoh. And just think a little bit about this. It's not even just, first, money. I got to make money. If I don't make money, then we're not going to eat. Or we're going to lose our house. And I know that's a very serious fears that's going on in a lot of people right now. Literally millions of people around our country are probably starting to fall into that fear. And I hope that today, by faith, you can have some rest. But there's other things. Our worth and our promotions, our name, all these things, they're all good. There's nothing bad about wanting to have money. There's nothing bad about trying to do some good job or wanting to get a promotion or to have a name or to gain worth and to find something in this life that you feel like gives you worth. None of those things are bad, but if you take God out of it, it will rot. And the thing that's supposed to be good will come back. It'll come back to get us. And that's part of the curse. And a lot of people today don't understand that. And if there is no one day that's set apart, and there is no voice from another time and another place to break in. There's no window to another reality. This is all there is. There's just Egypt. And so the work, how can it get away from you? Even if you, quote unquote, take time off and you stop working, I'm asking you this question: how can you get to the actual place of the stop and of the rest, not just of your body, where you're not in front of your computer, or you're studying, or doing physical labor, or at your, whatever it is that you do to do work. If you have this anxiety and in all the preoccupations of the promise of work and of the need of work, then all those things will still have a grip on you, and you're still captured into Egypt. So that's one point. Second point. This is a passage that's making a reference back to a time when the people of Israel, they've been released out of Egypt. And then God has taken them through the wilderness to the promised land. But there are many of them, they essentially, because they're not there yet, and every day there's a certain amount of stress. Where will our food be? Like they're not even working for their food. God just gives them their food every morning through manna. And what they begin to do is they begin to grumble. And anytime it feels like their life is threatened, what they begin to do is says, it would have been better if we were back in Egypt. And so then they start looking back to Egypt, and then they want some other God besides Yahweh. And that's where this passage picks up. So that's a question I want to ask you. It's a scary question, and this is it's actually a rather stern text. And what it's saying is that, are you going to want to go back to Egypt? You receive this good news. You've been released by one greater than Joshua. That's what the passage is talking about. And so if you know your Bible, Moses took the Israelites who were slaves out of Egypt, but he couldn't take them to the promised land. And then he died on the other side of the river, not on the promised land. And then Joshua came along, and then he was the next generation, and he took the Israelites into this promised land that God had chosen for them. But what this passage is saying is that whole movement that happened in history is not just something that's happening in history. It's happening in your life. It's happening in my life. And there's a drama, the central drama of whether you know you're actually going to the promised land and you have faith that God's going to take you out of enslavement. The actual drama, the crux of that drama is on Sabbath. So that's a mouthful. Let's read this passage. So this is Hebrews chapter 4, verse 6. Since therefore it remains for some to enter it, and those who formerly received the good news failed to enter because of disobedience. There we go, the people, God killed them in the wilderness. Again, he appoints a day that's God today, saying through David so long ago in the words already quoted, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken of another day. So here's the verse I really want you to take in. So then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. If you're going to enter God's rest, you have to learn rest. Because if you're going to become fully human and then to be in his presence and to be made in his image, you're going to be like him. And so just as at creation, God worked for 6 days and then he stopped, he's saying if you want to live in the promised land, you will not work 7 days, you will stop. And so here is this command, and will you believe that there really is a promised land? So then he goes on, verse 11. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest. Strive to enter that rest, so that, are you up there? Verse 11. So that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and spirit, of joints and of marrow, and discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. Now, I want to hear the words of God that I want to cut into your heart, and I want you to wrestle with this question. There remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. There is a rest that's going forward. And it's interesting. There's an ultimate rest when we get to the promised land, and then we practice that looking forward to in what I'm calling a window through stopping. And then he says this in verse 11, strive to enter that rest. Why? Because we don't know how to do it. We're not actually good at it. It's a strange, when I was young, I read that. It's like, well, that's really weird. You have to strive to enter a rest. The reason you have to strive is because there has to be a fight inside of you. If there isn't a fight inside of you to all the part that's fearful or worried or constantly where you're trying to practice, I have to be Lord of my life and I have to have control, or I have to save myself, and the way to save myself is to work more, to get more done and to do more and to be more productive. If that's the way your wisdom is going to be, I hope today's word will cut to your heart. And that instead there'll be a fight. Let me put it a little bit. Let us fight. Not just let us strive, let us fight to enter into that rest. And that we will begin to put up moats and barriers, not physical moats and barriers, but there'll be like a moat. You guys know what a moat is, a castle, and then there's this thing that keeps and protects the castle. But let there be like a moat or certain kind of protections around your mind and around your heart. And one of the ways to do this is to take a whole day and to stop and live inside of your identity and to look forward, not to New York City, but to the full rest from God who has defeated and taken away the curse. Okay? Let me go to part 2. I want to give you 2 pieces of wisdom today. I know I'm generally a person that tries, as a pastor, tries not to multiply to-do things. But if we're going to have a fight and then we're going to learn rest, we need new practices. Because so many of our practices in our lifestyle are shaped and conditioned by our enslavement to Egypt, including the enslavement to your own Pharaoh of your own mind. And so I want to give you 2. Now, the first one, I hope doesn't sound too elementary. It's both one of those things that's super basic, but it's also incredibly advanced. And the first one is this. You should develop a real prayer life. Develop a real prayer life. And some of you are like, oh, Pastor, I'm so bad at that. Okay, I get it. One of the things why the Sabbath is a particularly good time to talk about a prayer life is because most of us know that this is supposed to be a day set apart from God, for God. And the Sabbath is, as Jesus said, is made for man. Man isn't made for the Sabbath. You're not here to be squished into doing some kind of religious practice. It's here to bless you and fill your heart. Well, one of the most important ways it fills your heart is that you have to know that you belong to the Lord. And whatever is giving you anxiety, whatever is giving you fear, you can't just go, stop worrying about it. Stop thinking about the midterm tomorrow, or that promotion that I really want, or if I don't do X, Y, Z things, my whole group is going to look down on me. Whatever it is. Or if we don't get more work, then our business is going to close down. However it is that anxiety that's going in, well, how are you going to get rid of that anxiety if you have no prayer life? And if you're not one of these people that knows how to have a regular prayer life every day, let me encourage you, have it at least once per week. And you know that tomorrow is not just going to be a worship day. If you're, Pastor, I don't even know how to pray for 5 minutes. Okay? I don't even know if I can pray for 2 minutes. Well, you could start. You could pray for 2 minutes, 1 day a week. And maybe you could start by saying, Jesus, I'm terrible. I guess I'm still under the thumb of Pharaoh because I'm really worried about this and that in my work. I'm worried about my children, and if I don't do the 5 things that are on my to-do list, then then, our house is going to be a mess and the kids won't be well off. And moms, let me ask you, in prayer, remember, Jesus gives you rest. This is a gift. You have to go to a place of faith. And how do you actualize that faith? So on this day of rest, go to Him. Fly to Him. And put all your cares upon Him. Last week, we sang that song. Our brother Andy chose that song. Beautiful song. I cast all my cares upon you. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing it again, okay? And but so maybe you don't even know how to pray very well. Then sing that song and pray that song. And then mean it. And that'd be a very good way to start to practice and have a fight, to strive to fight to enter into His rest. Okay, that's one. It's relatively simple. Let me give you a second one. And this is the one I want to especially emphasize today. And that is find. You got to find this. Some of you may not even know what this is for you yet. And if you don't know what this is for you, you have to find it. And for each of you, it's probably different. The thing that your husband likes to do may not be the thing the thing your best friend likes to do, it may not be for you. So find and then do regular life-giving habits. Find something you really, I don't even want a hobby sounds like almost like too little of a word. But find something that when you do this isn't just fun. I'm not talking about not working. I'm not talking about entertainment. I'm not even talking about fun. A lot of people just think, okay, we're not working. Let's just go have fun. Let's just go eat good food and then watch a movie, Netflix, or do fun. Some people like video games, whatever. Fun does not equal rest. There's something that fills up your heart. That when your heart feels empty or dry or you're dying inside or you're even hurting inside, so all of it. And by the way, you don't have to hurt. If you just feel empty and dry and you don't have much left in the tank, you are, in a sense, you are hurting. Even if you're not upset or crying. And so you need to find those things. God put a lot of good things in the world. And for whatever reason, the way you're wired or the way you brought up, who knows, some combination of nature and nurture, or maybe this is just from God to you, there's something in the world that's like His gift to you. And you should go find it and go do it and enjoy it. So I want to give you an example of this. So I read this a number of years ago. This is from a book. I'm going to read a little passage from a book called What They Didn't Teach You in Seminary. Okay? And so it's actually written by a pastor for pastors. So it's like an older, experienced pastor teaching young men who want to go into the pastorate or young pastors. And this was the very first chapter. This is the very first chapter. And one of the things he's talking about is, since pastoral ministry is so demanding, it's not just demanding in terms of time, but it's demanding in terms of relationships. So some of you may think pastors don't do much, but there's a lot for us to do. If we pastors don't stop, literally, there's always something to do. There's always something more to be done. Someone that you feel like I should call them, I should consider them, or like pray for them, or something bad is happening over there. Something bad could be prevented. There's all kinds of things like that. Now, you don't have to be a pastor to understand this. Inside your own work, there's probably endless things. And there's probably numerous kinds of things that give you anxiety. But I'm just telling you, inside of one of the hard things about being a pastor is there's a lot of that. And every now and then something breaks and it just completely blows up. And he gave this example of a time when he was about to go off on vacation, and then he got this call from, I think, one of the other persons on staff, and then a bunch of people that gathered at that other person's house found out that so-and-so on staff was having an affair with the worship leader. And then, of course, it blew up his vacation, and then, this was a horrible mess inside their staff, and then it was incredibly painful then from the relationships. It broke a lot of relationships. So this is just Something that's really bad that can happen, this is the kind of a disaster scenario inside of a pastor's work. You all have disaster scenarios, and then that could really hurt and break you, but you have to stop. And so this is one of the pieces of advice he gave, and I think it's incredibly relevant to you, life-giving habits. So this is how he put it. I've had to learn to intentionally pursue, this is James Emery White, emotionally replenishing experiences. When you hurt, if you don't find something God-honoring to fill your tank with, you'll find something that isn't God-honoring. Or at the very least, you'll be vulnerable to something that isn't. I'm convinced this is why so many pastors struggle with pornography. Of course, not only pastors, lots of men do. It offers a quick emotional hit. To prevent that, I've had to learn to do things that channel deep emotional joy into my life. For some folks, it's boating or golf or gardening. For me, it's travel, reading, time alone with my family, enjoying anything outdoors, particularly the mountains. That's the way he put it. Several years ago, a man I had invited into my life in a mentoring relationship asked, Jim, what do you do that really puts gas back into your tank? If you could do one thing that would rejuvenate you spiritually and emotionally, what would it be? I didn't have to think very long or hard. Some of you, you might have to think. Maybe you don't know. He's blessed that he does know. But in his case, this is his answer, because I knew the answer. I would go to the mountains and be alone. Well, because he's an introvert. It's interesting. He makes that point too. He says, it's strange that a lot of pastors are introverts. I personally am not. I think Young is a little bit more toward the introverted side, but I'm very much on the extroverted side. But he's an introvert. And this is the way he put it. For as long as I can remember, the mountains have held special significance for my spirit and emotions that I cannot explain. Being there alone is particularly rich as I gain my deepest emotional energies apart from others. He said, good. That's his mentor. You should do that once a month. I laughed. You got to be kidding. Right? Once a month? The mountains? I was like, I don't have the time. This guy, I don't know if he was a megachurch pastor back then, but he's a megachurch pastor now. And so, you don't have to be a megachurch pastor and never feel like you don't have the time. And you don't even have to be a pastor and not think you don't have the time. So this is a reaction. Completely normal if you live in Egypt. My life is too busy, too full to put something like that into my schedule. Then he said something I'll never forget. If you don't, you will end up in a ditch. You will burn out, lose your ministry, perhaps even your family, and become a casualty of the cause. I knew he was right. I was already seeing the edges of my life fraying and knew how easily my world could unravel. Just think about that for a moment. When I don't know if many of you know this, but one of the things I do as a pastor is I've studied marriages and family, and as I meet you, I look for indicators that your marriage is fraying. And when I walk around and meet people in the city, because I have like these pieces of knowledge, you know what I notice? People tell me little things, and they don't, of course, they're not trying to tell me anything private, but they don't have to tell me anything private. They just tell me something that's a little factoid of how their life is going, and I know their life is fraying. I know their marriage is in trouble. And this is all over our city. This is what Egypt, in the wilderness, no Sabbath rest, no rest from God, like God, does to people. And so how do you get real rest? Your soul, your heart must find a whole new energy and a fullness. That's what real rest is. And you have to have deep permission. In fact, a command. It's more than a permission. It's a command. Because God knows you need this, and he wants to love you this way. So then here's how it goes. So I went to the mountains. My first trip found me staying in a budget hotel, so it wasn't fancy, just overnight in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I remember it to this day. It was like water on a dry desert. I felt energy and emotional renewal flowing into the deepest recesses of my inner being. See Sabbath as a soul. I came home walking on air. I entered our foyer, hugged my kids, and kissed my wife. She thought I'd been drinking. I had from the well of emotional renewal from which God intends. That's where he said, I had been drinking, but not alcohol, from the well of renewal from God, for all of us, which he intends to draw from the living water. So now I escape to the mountain to a little bed and breakfast monthly. Every month I leave on a Thursday afternoon. He's a pastor, his Sabbath is not Sunday. So I guess he goes, so on a Thursday afternoon, as I drive toward the cool air and clear skies, I feel the weight of the world falling off my shoulders. I feast off of it for weeks, 4 to be exact, until I venture to my precious emotional retreat once again. On the front end, I would have told you that it was impossible to put this into my life. Looking back, I tell you that it's unthinkable not to have it. So here's my question for you. If you could do one thing that would rejuvenate you emotionally, what would it be? In your heart, I'm saying, what could you do that could give you a Sabbath of the heart and of your mind? Put that moat around your mind. So it's like the prayer is the beginning of that moat. But then this life-giving habit is a thing that's going to fill your heart to give you real rest of the soul. So now here's my challenge for your sake. Go do it. So let me just give you, this isn't what I do. I'm not a mountain person. I've done this a few times. I'm more of a beach person, and I go and I spend long hours actually in prayer with God. And my wife could tell you this too. I come home from the beach, and she could tell I'm just better. But I don't do it once a month. I do it more like maybe twice a year or 3 times a year. But I'm thinking about that. And so, what is your mountain? I want to ask you that question. What's your mountain? And it's not something that you may do every week, but maybe you could pick a day. And it might not even be Sunday, and you could do it regularly. So I want to just give you some possibilities. Talking and enjoying something together with a close friend or your spouse or a family member. Maybe that. Could be my wife and I, we take, in a sense, I believe that my wife and I, we try to take a Sabbath at the end of the day. And so for an hour or 2, we watch some TV show, and then sometimes we talk about it, and then we conk out. And it doesn't seem like much, but it's my favorite person. And so being with her, sometimes a TV show stinks, and sometimes it's good. And it does something. It's an important habit in my life. How about some other ones? Maybe you like reading a book and over a really good cup of coffee. So go to your favorite cafe. Give yourself permission to buy that coffee that costs too much money and read a book that has nothing to do with work. Maybe it's anime. All right? Maybe it's a comic book. And then go do it. And do that for a couple hours or an hour or whatever it is that is it. I thought about maybe for you it's cooking, and so it's interesting because the work of cooking may be fun for you. Cooking and then eating something you really like. Some of you the eating might not be the cool part. Maybe the cooking is the cool part. I know most of us, it's the eating, right? And one other one that came to mind while I was thinking about this message is a number of years ago, I watched a movie called Field of Dreams. And people think it's about baseball, but it's not. It's about this. It's about a window into a place and a time when all the curse and the things that break you down in life would be healed. And so it's just in the movie that it's imagined as a baseball field. And it's a young Kevin Costner. And then he gets this moment when he plays catch with his dad. And as a boy, he used to play catch with his dad, you know? And then he got to do so. He got to do so now as an older man. And then and he said, I only saw my dad when he was young and life was breaking him down and it was stressing him out. And sometimes we'd play catch, and then until this thing, which was supposed to be fun for us, one day I told him I didn't want to do it anymore, and I really hurt him. It's like it's not even just work that's cursed. But Sabbath, there's a day when all that curse is going to be removed. And can there be something in your life that can remind you could easily do this? And so I was actually thinking about this about a few weeks ago. My son and I, we went out to the backyard and we played catch. And I was totally thinking about this movie. And so maybe it's something like that. Something easy. Maybe it's going for a walk in certain places. So what is that? Have a fight in your life. Prepare it. Make time for it. Make it a priority, please. And in faith, get that permission. It's more than a permission. It's a command from God. And please obey it and live inside Sabbath rest. Now let's close. I want to close. I'm already giving you some of the gospel here. You think about this. You can't go and give yourself 2 hours to go sit and be unproductive. Oh, unproductive. It's actually incredibly productive. Deeply rested people over the long haul. In the short term, you're going to feel like I'm losing out to all the other workaholics and slaves. But in the long term, deeply rested people can go long. They'll have power when other people run out. And so I'm giving you already some parts, but in order to do that, you have to believe in something. And you need to have this break, this stop, and this day. And the whole day is this window. And so I want to close by saying this, all right? What is it that steals away your rest? So what is it that typically preoccupies you? Is it money? Is it getting good grades? Is it, if I don't get into this school and get these scores, if I don't get to this level, then I'll be nothing. Maybe it's your worth. Maybe it's meaning. Maybe it's just you have to be in control. If I stop and I have to believe that everybody else is going to be doing this, and then I won't be in control. Maybe it's you are in control. Maybe it's self-lordship is your real problem. That's why you have to do work. And I want to say this thing. Today, can you believe that you can stop? And the only way you can believe you can stop is if one better than Joshua. See, Joshua could help them cross the river. They went into a new land, and for a time, the people followed after God, and then they enjoyed this new land, and then they fell again. And then, essentially, they kind of started making a new Egypt. It's like they're out in Egypt, and this new land, Canaan, started becoming the next kind of Egypt. The only way you could do this is if you really begin to believe that sin, which is not even just bad things that you do, it's things that you believe. It's heart attitudes that you have. It's habits that steal away all your joy and that steal away even inside your heart that you really belong somewhere else and that there's going to be a promise in the future. So I want to close this way. If all things are cursed, and definitely work, I want to point you to one greater than Joshua. Jesus came, and that's why, because he had to pay a bigger price. And he had to wash us with his blood. And that washing, it sounds like a weird metaphor, because your whole soul has to be washed. with all the self-lordship things that are going on inside of you, all the anxiety that has to be washed. And then Jesus can lift the curse. And you need a day to live inside of that. And you need habitually to live inside of that. So you need worship. You need to sing the songs to the one who destroyed and ended the curse with his blood and with new life. And he'll take us to this promised land. So here's the way I want to close. There's a famous song, and you all know this song, because it's always sung every year at Christmas. But there's a verse that most people don't tend to sing. It's verse 3, and I'm going to sing it for you. I know, this is great. You get to listen to me sing, right? I'm going to sing this verse for you, and I want to urge this to you. This is the gospel for Sabbath. I want you to remember this. So here it is. No more let sins and sorrows grow, nor thorns infest the ground. He comes to make his blessings flow, far as the curse is found, far as the curse is found, far as the curse is found. Joy to you, okay? Joy to the world, joy to you. Jesus has come to remove all curse. One day a week, would you remember that? Stop. Stop like God stops. Rest, not like the way you know how to rest, the way He rests. And rest and believe this. As far as the curse is found, Jesus gives you this promise, better than Joshua, that all things can be made new. And you can have a full heart once again. Let's pray. Lord, we are enslaved and we are weak. And the pharaohs of the world put fear. It's like the whip of fear and of anxiety and of sadness. And over time, even the good things that we used to enjoy, we don't even know how to enjoy. It's like, I used to like eating that food, but then we just go eat this food again because it's quote unquote fun. And we think, now that I'm not working, that will help me feel better. But we know that the third episode on Netflix, it leaves us empty. But how can our hearts be made full again? And help us to see the things in life as gifts from you. They can only be gifts again if we see them in light of the promised land. And if we live in the window of that promised land, in Sabbath rest, a rest given by Yeshua, whose name is like Joshua. His name actually is Joshua, but better than Joshua. For as the curse is found, He lifts off all the curse of work and all curse of sin, to fill our hearts and make our cups overflow and make all good things a gift to us again. I pray for my brothers and sisters and everybody listening to this message, especially in this stressful time of the coronavirus, Lord, they would look for and they would have a fight and they would find that thing, that gift that you have wired them to taste and enjoy, their mountain. They would receive it as a great, great gift from Jesus, their Sabbath rest. In Jesus' name, amen.